Well, thank you for staying with us on the program this morning, everyone. We appreciate your understanding. So let's get the conversations on the road. Full throttle, quickly. I'm joined by my guests. So it's a one-on-one interaction we're having this morning. Barrister Ede Asanogwa is one-time chairman of the Nigerian Bar Association, Benin branch. It's a pleasure to have you on the program this morning.
Thank you very much, Ray, and good morning, listeners at home.
All right, straight away, I want to engage you on our first line of discussion this morning, which has to do with counting the cost of fighting insecurity in this country. A certain report now places that cost in the last 6 years, between 2015 and today, in excess of 10 trillion naira. That's a whole lot of money, even for a country like Nigeria, for example. And then you're wondering, if we were to juxtapose the amount of success we've recorded so far, even though that's a bit controversial, depending on who is looking at what, vis-a-vis these investments, as it were, do we find some balance at some point?
Well, on the issue of insecurity and what this country has spent by way of money that has been budgeted to fighting insecurity, and whether or not we have had commensurate results, my own position clearly is that we have not. Looking at that money and the evidence that we have on ground, the truth of the matter is that not all of that money has actually gone into fighting insecurity. Only recently I watched a discussion program on channels where one of the members of the National Assembly was being interviewed, and he himself said we have all failed in terms of security. And that they had a panel or a committee that invited the Chief of Army Staff. And one of the questions that was posed to the Chief of Army Staff was, let us know, this money we keep budgeting year in and year out for security, how has it been spent? And then the Chief of Army Staff said, well, I was not there. That they should go and invite those who were there before his predecessor to come and explain what happened to such monies.
Is that tenable? Is that tenable?
Of course it is not. It's unreasonable, it's embarrassing, it's a shame. The office of the Chief of Army Staff is an office. It doesn't matter who is occupying there at a given point in time. Records must be there. If money was budgeted and that money got to that office, there must be records of how the money was spent. And whoever comes in there takes off from where he came to meet whatever is on ground. So for you to be telling the world and the National Assembly that, oh, I wasn't there at that time, I don't want to answer any question, bordering on the funds that have been released to a specific purpose to that office before I came in, I don't want to go there. That in itself shows that something is wrong. I don't want to be the one to say that these people either mismanaged it or they didn't use it or whatever.
So go hear from the horse's mouth.
Go hear from the horse's mouth. As embarrassing as that. Now, there was another clip I saw on social media where even the president himself being interviewed by some foreign news station told the world that, you know, our security chiefs, they went for lunch and sat down and shared billions of naira meant for acquisition of arms. So what does that tell us? That from the 10 trillion naira which, you know, records show have been spent or ought to have been spent on fighting insecurity, a large chunk of that money has gone into private pockets. And so what we have today is clearly a half-hearted fight against insecurity. I believe as a person that the government is encouraging insecurity actually more than fighting insecurity in Nigeria. That is my position. And evidence is clear. You can't say you are fighting insecurity and you are paying ransom. You can't say you are fighting insecurity after paying ransom, you do not make any arrest. You can't say you are fighting insecurity. First of all, they will tell you, oh, students have been abducted. We know where they are. We know their location. But we don't want to go in full throttle. We don't want to attack because we don't want to lose lives.
Because we're trying to avoid collateral damage.
Exactly. Now, these children are eventually released.
Right.
Some persons will come and tell you, oh, we want to go and negotiate. And they will really indeed negotiate. And then they will tell you, children will be released on a particular day and time. And these children are released. The man who went to negotiate apparently knows those he negotiated with. He's not called to question. He's not told to produce those he negotiated with. And the people go back in a few weeks and do another damage. Another money is spent. Another negotiation is done. So it's a circle, and it's going to continue for as long as the government continues to encourage issue of payments of ransom. They are not decisive. And I keep saying, the former head of state of this country has said that if insurgency lasts for more than 24 hours, the government has a hand in it.
I want to push you further on something very important, especially now that you already made an allusion to the idea or concept of paying ransom, given the circumstances we're dealing with. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo says it's foolhardy for a government to buy, government at any level, to buy into the idea of paying ransom in cases like this. Of course, we have seen even Zamfara State, for example, Zamfara State Governor, Mr. Matawale, coming out to say, look, we don't have much of, many options in this circumstance. We have to save lives, we have to do the needful, we have to be proactive, and one way we can do that is to pay ransom where necessary. Conversely, the governor of Kaduna State, Malam Nasir El-Rufai, says, no way, come rain, come shine, his government won't pay a kobo to anybody in the name of ransom, even if the case becomes such that his son or his daughter is kidnapped. I don't know at what point we got to this extent where we pay ransom, but a lot of persons are saying what we're doing is we're commercializing criminality and crimes across board to make it even more compounded. A certain Sheikh Gumi now has been in the eye of the storm for a while. Some persons are saying on the one hand, look, there's no better time for the DSS, for example, to invite this man for questioning. After all, you've had several interfaces with these persons, for instance. And the others are saying, well, we don't want to, maybe they don't want to offend certain interests, so they want to play it cool, sleeping dogs should lay low, and so on and so forth. Can we continue this trajectory and still expect to come out without smelling of smoke?
Now, the implication and effect of all of that is that more and more groups will go into criminality. Kidnapping and abduction is now a very lucrative business. It is not now just the individual parents that are paying. In any event, the recent ones of these Kaduna's schools and all of that, the parents were not the people they were asking to come and pay money, because at the end of the day, many of those parents are indigent. So it has now gotten to the point where you are asking the government, state and federal, to come and pay money. And their demands are not small. So, and once the government does that, that same group will do another business because they've made so much money from it. You don't stop a business in which you are profiting. Can somebody stop a business where you are making profit? The answer is no. Now, very soon, other gangs will come up. It's lucrative because the government is encouraging it. Look, no government worth its onions to pay ransom. It's a worldwide principle and policy. We will never negotiate with terrorists. We will never negotiate with criminals. So where a government begins to negotiate with criminals, it means that the government itself is encouraging criminality. And that is the problem. And that's why I said just now, somebody like Sheikh Gumi, all of a sudden, who now knows who these, they call them bandits. I don't know the difference between bandits and criminals. Now, you go to negotiate with them. You come back to discuss with government. Oh, this is what the discussions we have had. What is the reason? Why do these people keep abducting school children? Why? Why do they abduct them? From all that has happened, it is clear that the purpose is to make money. And they are threatening that, oh, we will kill them if you don't pay us. So the real reason why they kidnap them is to make money. And the government is paying them money. So why will they not continue? Of course, it will be sad that if we say, oh, don't pay, like you said, the governor said, there is no circumstance under which ransom should be paid to a kidnapper by government.
Even when children are being slaughtered, for example.
When it becomes clear to them, we kidnap 200 children, nobody pays us ransom. They killed 200, and no money came. After killing, the government should go after them. It will discourage further kidnappings. Sacrifices must be made. We are already in a situation, lives are being lost daily in any event. So many of these people, they tell you, oh, if you don't pay, we will kill. Because that's the weapon they have.
Right.
By the time you finish killing all those that are with you, and the government really come, in fact, let the government attack them when the children are there. Those that will be saved, let them be saved. Because it has gotten to that point. Something difficult, something hard, a decision that is difficult to take must be taken.
I want to take you back to where we started this conversation from. I mean, I know you're not, I don't know how much of military background you have, but I know you're a Nigerian who's very interested in all of these developments. Is it so difficult to track monies allocated for the purpose of fighting insecurity or for defense? For instance, we've heard about some certain Super Tucano jets being purchased. Some of them have been in the works for years now by way of purchase. It's quite a rigorous process and so on and so forth. And you have billions of Naira taxpayers' money going into all of these purchases. Of course, most people say much of these monies cannot be accounted for. We saw, just like you made reference to a while ago, where the current Chief of Army Staff was being interrogated and asked questions as to what the spending has been like. And he was making references to those who were in that office before him. And they say government is continuum. I'm sure that also applies to offices such as that of the Chief of Army Staff. For example, what more should we be doing by way of tracking finances as they have to do with fighting insecurity?
Now, you see, the government has clearly, shown that they lack the willpower. It's a matter of willpower. That's what it is. Now, once the head is corrupt, everything goes. Everything and anything goes. Nigerians, for a long time, clamored, agitated for the change of the service chiefs.
And that has happened.
Now, whether it has happened or not, I really do not know. Why were Nigerians clamoring? Why the agitation? That these people have failed. They have run out of ideas. They apparently do not now know what to do to curb the descent into this grave insecurity situation. And what did the president do? In fact, the National Assembly joined in that clamor. What did the president do? The president merely removed them from one place and compensated them. Don't mind these Nigerians. They are just shouting, please come and hold this side. You gave them something else. After they left office, questions were never asked. No auditing, no probing, no. I mean, there ought to be some form of, okay, this was where you came into this office. You are living at this point. What's happened? What the monies that we are giving? Why did we really suffer the way we suffered under this? But rather, they were compensated with some other office. Don't be angry, since they are saying you must live here. Oh, you live here, go on. And then you put somebody else there. And we're asking the man questions. The man say, go and ask those people. And those people are enjoying themselves somewhere. So, does that really show a government that is serious in tracking what you are, budgeting for security? No, it does not. The present one there now went to the Senate to ask for money. He's asking for his own.
Right.
The ones that was there before, I didn't meet anything. I don't even know how it was spent. Now I'm here. There is nothing. Please come and give me.
Meanwhile, the Senate committee is asking you to defend what had already been given to the office.
I can't give you answers for that. What does that tell us? The records are not there to show that this was what was done or this was what was done. That's what it means. Or he himself has not even looked at his records to know where he's coming in and where he's going to continue from. It's either of the two, and none of them is suiting to the ears. None. So we have a problem. And I take it that that problem is because of leadership failure. If you send a man to go and do a job, and the man is not doing the job, there must be consequences.
Right.
And for as long as there are no consequences, Nobody feels obligated to do anything.
I'm going to engage you on leadership in a minute, but I was going to ask you something about an angle to this whole conversation. I mean, more than ever before, the calls have become even louder now that Nigeria should reach out to the international community to seek help, and of course, we are eyeing the U.S. to help us do that. The president engaged the U.S. Secretary of State recently to say, look, they should move Africa all the way from Stuttgart in Germany closer to home, where, according to the president, Muhammadu Buhari, we have the theater of operations. Some persons have said the president should have escalated it by taking it straight to Mr. Joe Biden, who happens to be the U.S. president, rather than bringing it so low to the U.S. Secretary of State. Maybe that's a conversation for another day. But more importantly, will the U.S. or any other serious-minded country, for that matter, see us as a serious entity or a country when we obviously haven't done our homework?
Well, you see, most of those issues are not going to work because those countries, they are actually laughing at us. You cannot call the aid of another country, for instance, when you are not serious. For me as a person, I believe that call, it's face saving. There's no genuine intention behind it. If we were doing what we were supposed to do, we don't need to be begging them to come. They will see that efforts are being made. Oh, maybe you are being overwhelmed. They can fund, they can provide the equipment, they can provide the technical know-how. But you see, take for instance, the government of America came here to rescue their citizens. I can tell you for free that operation, without the knowledge of our security agencies. And I can also tell you for free that if they were brought into the picture, that operation would have failed.
I mean, you are a lawyer, obviously. Does that constitute a violation of our territorial integrity, that operation itself?
Well, let Nigeria now go and tell them, that you have come to violate our territorial integrity. Make a case if you think you have a case. Do you understand?
Right.
Every country has a right to protect their citizen wherever that citizen is. It's only in Nigeria. Now, Nigeria cannot protect Nigerians even in Nigeria, not to talk of in another country. That's the point. So where we have not shown seriousness on our part, where we have not shown the political will to fight, insecurity, then you are going to call another person who will come and assist us when they know you are not actually serious about fighting insecurity. Would you come? That's the simple question. Will you come? So for me, let's see how that plays out. We must be seen to be doing it genuinely, seriously, before we can be asking for help. That's the truth. I recall the other time they said Nigeria was asking, come and give us debt relief. And they said, you want debt relief? When maybe 10 Nigerians can pay off the debt that you are owing? It doesn't make sense. People are striving, people are making sacrifices to develop their countries. We are doing everything we can to destroy our country. That's what it is. And then you want them to come and tell us, don't destroy your country? That's the problem.
I'm going to take you up on our second discussion straight away now, because I understand our time is limited. Recently, the caucus, the PDP minority caucus at the House of Reps, came up raising issues about the level of leadership, the quality of leadership we have in this country. And then to add to that, the minority caucus of the Senate, led by Senator Eyinaya Baribe, is now saying that a compilation of the president's constitutional breaches, or if you like, infractions, is being recorded now. And the idea is ultimately the leadership would announce the appropriate sanctions, legislative sanctions as they call it. And some persons are saying what that essentially means is impeachments, the call for impeachment of the president. There had been rumors, of course, for impeachment. There had been certain moves for impeachment, whether at the House of Reps or at the Senate, for example. And then you're wondering, will impeachment do the magic or perform a miracle to save Nigeria from all of the problems that it's dealing with right now?
For me, if it were possible, I think the move for impeachment is even delayed, it's overdue. If the members of the National Assembly are just starting to compare the infractions, the breaches, and all of that. And the Constitution calls it gross misconduct. That's the only ground for wanting to impeach the president. Okay. They are just beginning to do that. They are late. But the truth of the matter is that it's not going to work. It is not going to work. Now, in this country, one of the major problems we have is that no matter what you do, no matter how wrong it is, in terms of policy or conduct of a public officer, you know, and somebody else comes to criticize that conduct or action, so many Nigerians, we rush to the defense of that office holder on the basis of, oh, this person is from my tribe. This person is of the same religion with me. This person is from my state. All right? And they begin to defend what obviously is not worth defending. And the problem becomes that, oh, they say the person who is criticizing because he's from another state, because he's from another political party. And then the issues are befuddled. It's no longer the objectivity of the questions that have been raised. It is now a question of who is raising it. Why are you raising it?
Where is it from?
Where is it from? What is your religion? And then the issues are lost. Now, I have also heard that the APC caucus are already making counter moves. Take for instance, let's go back to America. When there was a call for the impeachment of then President Donald Trump, we saw members of the Republican Party voting.
Ranking members.
Voting for the impeachment of their president who belong to the same political party with them. It can never happen in Nigeria. It can never happen in this country.
Does that mean an absence of patriotism, for example?
You have hit the nail on the head. Nigerians owe no allegiance to Nigeria. Majority of Nigerians, especially our political office holders. First, they are from one ethnic group. They are from a particular state. They belong to a particular religion. Nobody cares about what happens to Nigeria. Nobody. And that is the problem. So you find that, oh, this president is from our side. He must remain there, whether he's working or not. This governor is from my side. Whether he's working or not, he must remain there. And nobody from his side is going to criticize him. They may be grumbling in their respective homes, but they will never join on a call to remove that man because he's from their side. They will never join in saying, oh, this man is not doing well because he's from the same political party.
In an ideal situation, is the process for impeaching a president or even a governor very rigorous, whether in the case of Nigeria or otherwise?
No, yeah, it is rigorous. It is rigorous because, you know, it's not something the drafters of the Constitution envisioned should happen on a daily basis. All right, it's a rare instance. So it's something that it must get to the limit. And for you to be, for instance, to impeach the president of this country, there must be, you know, an allegation made against him, signed by 1/3 of the members of the National Assembly. 1/3 to kickstart it. And thereafter, every other voting and all of that requires 2/3 majority of the members of the National Assembly. That's not easy to get. Right. Against the background of the fact that people are not interested in whether you have actually committed these offenses. They're interested, oh, this man is from the north. No northerners should vote against him. This man is a Muslim. No Muslim person should vote against him. Those are the issues. And once it comes to those, you know, mundane issues, the real thing is lost. So even though it's due, even though I believe that the president has failed woefully in terms of security and in every other aspect, which I also believe is the views of majority of Nigerians today, impeachment is not likely going to work because of, you know, the way it has been made to look like in the Constitution.
Let me take your mind back to something. Chief Fayo Adembajo is the leader of the Afenifere group, which is a Yoruba socio-cultural enclave, as it were. And now he says, I mean, recently he has been speaking up about issues regarding insecurity and how that if Nigeria must remain one, we've got to have a negotiation, we've got to come to the table to have this conversation. And now he says the Constitution as it stands today, I mean, you are very familiar with the Constitution, quote unquote, it says calm. He strongly also recommends that we go back to the 1964 Constitution According to him, that's one document that late Amado Bello, Nnamdi Azikiwe, and Obafemi Awolowo had signed on to. In other words, for him, that's the only valid constitution that can save us as it stands right now. 1964 and today, it's like night and day. The realities of that time are not the same as what we have today. I mean, is that valid with you?
Well, I think that's a call towards regionalism. And for me, it should not be thrown away. Yes, 64 to today may be a world apart. But what we can do is to take the goods, the positives, from that 1964 constitution. The truth is that this present constitution as it stands is doing more harm than good. But you see, I am an advocate of the fact that it is not really our laws that are our problems.
Okay.
You know, it is the implementation and the operators. I believe very strongly that if you have a bad law and a good leader, we can make progress. But if you have a good law and you have a bad leader, you can't make progress. You understand? Because those laws needs to be applied.
Somebody needs to drive them.
Somebody needs to drive them. So the laws could take, for instance, we have a situation where under our present constitution, we have what we call federal character. Federal character will work when it is going to work against persons in some quarters, from some regions. And then it doesn't work when it is going to favor persons from a particular region. The president himself has violated that constitutional provision again and again and again. Nothing is happening. But that provision is there. When our students want to gain admission, they will tell you federal character. When you want to gain employment into federal civil service, there's federal character. And what that does is that a student from the south can score 380 in JAMB and will not gain admission. His counterpart, probably his own classmate from another state, Zamfara, Sokoto, will score 90 and gain admission. And then you are doing appointments into federal government parastatals. Go and look at it. Look at the record of the appointments that have been done by President Muhammadu Buhari. A particular region of this country is continuously being favored. No matter the cry, no matter the clamor, he's not listening. That is an infraction. So the constitution as it is today, even though I believe that, look, that's a constitution we didn't quite give to ourselves.
Right.
We have had at least 3 alterations to that constitution. The National Assembly have made amendments to the 1999 constitution 3 times. All aimed, at making it work better for us. That we can continue to do. But the problem is not the constitution. As much as it is one of the leadership and the implementation of this constitution. Obedience to this constitution. So people decide what to obey in the constitution and what not to obey in the constitution. So let us bring any constitution, whether 1964, 1979, anyone. It depends on the leadership. If the leadership still decides to disregard it, the way they are doing now, we will still be where we are. So that's the issue.
Most times when you talk to people about these issues and they quickly find a way spontaneously to link it with 2023 election, the general election. And then you're wondering, don't people need to be alive that long to even have an election in the first instance? So question is, how do we de-link, as it were, these insecurity issues, all of these economic challenges Nigeria is dealing with from 2023? At least that's still, give or take, over a year away, for instance. How do we face the issues of today?
Now, I will say this, and I will also give an example. That's why I said the government is not sincere. Now, before the 2015 election, there was some level of insecurity in the Northeast.
Right.
And INEC came out to say, look, we cannot conduct elections in those areas. And then the then president said, look, okay, fine. Give me 6 weeks. Let's postpone the election for about 6 weeks. We are going to make that place conducive.
Right.
And what happened? In 6 weeks, the place was safe for elections. Elections were now conducted in those areas. That was commitment of government. To wipe out, to make sure that that place was safe. You get the point? So, what we are facing now is because the government is allowing it. When it is time for election, I can assure you, these things will not be there. It will not be there. Because it's either they will tell their people, oh, stop, we want to conduct election. Or they will now go down decisively to make sure that the place is conducive for elections to hold, because they also know that they need that election to favor them.
Right.
So for me, it boils down to seriousness of government, the willpower to, because for me, unless and until the government decides that we must face this headlong,
Right.
we will continue to be where we are. That's the truth.
Oh, thank you so much, Barrister Ide Asenogwa, former chairman, Benin branch of the Nigerian Bar Association, for coming to share with us this morning. We do appreciate it. We're taking a quick break now to bring you a viewpoint. We'll back shortly to wrap up the program.